Good evening and a very warm welcome to Radio and Television Tonga News Package for the hour. Leading our bulletin tonight, the Consumer Affairs Division on their efforts on refunding public following complaints about fuel prices last Thursday. Foreign Affairs Minister Fikitamoeloa Utoikamanu leads Tonga's delegation to the 66th Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference in Canada. And Tonga to host the next Tropic Twilight exercise in 2023. Now for the stories in detail. The Consumer Affairs Division of the Ministry of Trade and Economic Development is currently looking into ways of refunding public funds following complaints about fuel prices last Thursday. In an interview with the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the Ministry, Sanjoti Fifita says there are regulations on this in accordance with the Law on Weights and Measures 1978. As the Consumer Affairs Division operations team inspected 26 fuel stations, and 6 stations were ordered to be temporarily shut down because these regulations were not strictly followed. Fifita added the inspections team also informed consumers of the status of pumps at fuel stations by displaying an updated sticker on pumps to be more noticeable to consumers. The stickers will be removed when the supplier of the service station is able to correct the pumps and is retested by the ministry's inspection team. The ministry is trying to talk with the 2 oil companies about a way to undo this problem for the overall well-being of the country. However, the ministry is currently working with the fuel companies to address this issue. The Foreign Affairs Minister highlighted the need for more investment on disaster risk preparedness. This was part of her address during a panel on disaster risk preparedness at the 65th Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference in Canada. Mark Ake tells you more.
Honorable Utoikamanu shared Tonga's recent experience with the devastating Hunga volcanic eruption and tsunami. She spoke of Tonga's extreme vulnerability to climate change and climate disasters. She also spoke of various laws and policies enacted to proactively address disaster management, as well as laws, regulations, and policies that were subsequently implemented by Parliament and government in response. The 65th Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference, or CPC, is being hosted by the CPA Canada region in Halifax, Canada, from the 20th of August to the 26th. The annual flagship event brings together with over 500 parliamentarians, parliamentary staff, and decision makers from across the Commonwealth to address the critical issues facing today's parliaments. Tonga's delegation to the 65th CPC is led by the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly and joined by Utoikamanu and Silvia Atiola from the Legislative Council. Preparatory meetings and workshops for the 65th CPC are currently underway. Utoikamanu is also representing Tonga at the 7th Triennial Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians Conference, which is being held during the CPC. The CPA Small Branches Network represents the smallest jurisdictions in all regions of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association to identify their needs and requirements in parliamentary strengthening, development, and cooperation. This year's theme is focused on inclusive, accessible, accountable, and strong parliaments, the cornerstone of democracy and essential for development.
As many people reported, there was a spike in the electrical bill, with some claiming to have paid more than the usual and others less than the usual. Now the Board of Utilities chairman has explained as to why that is. Mark Ake tells you more again.
The Board of Utilities Chairman Tapu Panuve explained that the transferring of data from the smart meter in each resident and company to the Tonga Parliamented server resulted in overs and unders of electrical bills in most residences and companies in Tongatapu, but explains there was no increase. Panuve told Radio and Television Tonga News this was due to the internet shutdown from the volcanic eruption earlier this year. He says during the internet blackout, the smart meter read and stored all data used by each resident and company, but then when the internet was restored at around the 21st or 22nd of February, the smart meter sends all the data or electrical bill used by the public to the head office server of Tonga Power Limited, and that's why people think there was a spike in the billing when there really wasn't. It is understood that a lot of residents and companies recorded higher electrical bills than usual, 6.6% in residents and 20% in companies. Those were unders. Their electrical bills in residents were 8.7% and 26.5% for companies. Banuvis says they've received more than 1,000 complaints from the public, and they've worked on addressing this issue with only 57 complaints yet to be completed as of today. They have amended the electrical bills of those that had to pay higher than usual by returning the remaining expenses to the people's electricity accounts, and also amended the 26.5% of companies that were unders with their electrical bills. He also says he's not acquainted with the methodology used for averaging the electricity bills, but he says it was obviously incorrect, hence the overs and unders of the bills.
New Zealand will partner with Tonga to further support resilience and recovery from natural disasters with a deployment of New Zealand Defence Force personnel for engineering and rebuilding projects. Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta and Defence Minister Benny Henare have announced exercise Tropic Twilight will take place in Tonga next year. The 2022 exercise has just been completed in Niue. The New Zealand Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta made the announcement on board on Her Majesty New Zealand ship Manawanui, a special dive and hydrographic vessel currently in Tonga, to help chart the harbour approaches of Nuku'alofa following the eruption and tsunami. Mahuta says the exercise offers a strategic opportunity to partner with key Tongan agencies, including the National Emergency Management Office and His Majesty's Armed Forces, to prepare and plan for responding to natural disasters. The volcanic eruption and tsunami caused the significant damage, and within 48 hours the New Zealand Defence Force provided support that was critical to initial response planning for the delivery of aid for the people of Tonga. This included Navy vessels and flights to provide aerial footage of the damage, followed by later deliveries by Navy vessels. Mahuta says the exercise in 2023 will assist the ongoing recovery and rebuild and to contribute to a stable, prosperous and resilient Pacific, reflecting Aotearoa New Zealand's Pacific resilience approach. Exercise Tropic Twilight is a regular training exercise focused on humanitarian and disaster relief resilience with Pacific partners. The task for the next deployment will be determined with Tonga, with the aim of providing practical assistance in an area where it is needed most. This work is a demonstration of New Zealand's continued commitment to Tonga's recovery and long-term resilience. The exercise Tropic Twilight is a fantastic example of the government's defence priorities of people and Pacific in action. However, the exercise Tropic Twilight was last held here in Tonga in 2016. And the Tonga Fire and Emergency Services rushed out to Bow College last night in response to a house fire incident reported at around 7 in the evening. The Acting Fire Commissioner, Sinamoni Kauwaka, told Radio Tonga News this morning the fire incident occurred at the college hospital, where it stored health facilities and equipments for the students' health and a place for quarantine students who will be infected from the COVID-19 inside the school compound. He added firefighters were able to save most of the building, including dental equipment designated for a dental unit of the school that is planning to open soon. The estimated cost of the damages to the building is around 50,000 ba'anga and is the 119th fire incident recorded by the department since the beginning of the year. Tonga Fire and Emergency Services continues to advise the public on proper procedures of dealing with substances related to fire and also to be cautious on electrical matters at home. They also still remind the public of their service phone number, the 999 or 999, for more emergency services and fire-related incidents. Sports is up next with Mark Ake, proudly sponsored by Pacific Timber and Hardware.
Tonga Rugby Union and Australian NGO Youth in Union have partnered up to run the Bovai Scrum School, a training program that specializes in the health and safety areas of scrummaging, a pivotal part in every rugby union match. The TRU Development Manager, Richard Taliaoli, says this 20-week initiative is in its 10th week.
One of the key areas that we've identified the development team is scrummaging. Number one, it was more of a health and safety for us, because the scrum is an area where you are most likely to injure your spinal cord. So for us, it was about going out grassroots, teaching. It's open from 15, 16 up, because that's when scrummaging is, you're allowed to compete in a scrum. So because it's the area, it's a real vital area where you and the kids can injure. For us, it was about going out to the community, starting this program where we are teaching the basics of rugby from technique to everything. We're starting from the ground up. And the next thing was, it's a key area where you can gain position in rugby. Majority of the teams here, they go out and they use the scrum as a time to rest, but it's actually an area where you can gain possession of the ball in defense and attack.
Taliaoli also says that the scrum school involves the entire 8 forwards pack and it isn't exclusive to front rowers as roles are interacted to function. In terms of turnout, the program has seen a healthy attendance every Saturday at the Halaono rugby field in Kolmotua.
At first, we started with about 8 girls and one other coach, one other local coach who showed up. But now we're almost in the 100 every Saturday. And then we have about 7 or 8 coaches that's constantly involved, So having the local coaches was one key area that we identified as well, because the sustainability of the program depends on it, It's about them going out to the communities as well. So it's a two approach for us, It was about coaching the coaches and coaching the players as well. So the 20-week program involves 2 sessions, one for the coaches where our scrum coach goes through the session, goes through everything with the coaches and to try to educate the local coaches a little bit more on the proper techniques of coach. And on the second session, which is always on a Saturday morning, that's when the local coaches help run the session. That's the way of them getting their hands, doing a little bit of practical where our head scrum coach overlooks the whole thing, but our local coaches sort of run it as a means of them trying to get more comfortable, using that opportunity to learn as well.
The program's head coach is former Melbourne Rebels player and Tongan international Eddie Aholelei. At the same time, the results of this initiative will be put to the test in upcoming local women's competitions, as explained by Taliaoli.
Women's rugby has always just been sevens here at the moment because we just don't have the numbers, just don't have the participation. And what we've identified from the last week we looked at a trip, which is the women's 15 to New Zealand, is our girls that left from Tonga, they were struggling a lot because they haven't played 15s. They haven't been in a proper scrum or a line out. So that was a gap in our development that we identified, and we were like, hey, look, this is something that we can do. Instead of having sevens here, we can have a 10s tournament. There's still the fundamentals of scrum and line out is there, but not as hard out as, I guess, as the 15. So it was an opportunity there for us to kind of bridge their knowledge and they're playing through 10s. So it's not quite 7s, not quite 15, but it's in the middle. So for our women's, we figured this would be the best approach for us to trial and see how they would do with their scrummaging and their lineouts for 10s, But our 10s competition is part of Tonga Rugby Union and the Australian HICOM's Pacific All Sports partnership, and it was just to help develop women's rugby, in every area, and having more competitions was part of the key areas that we're pushing through.
These competitions are being handled and planned by women, and they will hold these events on the 2nd and 3rd of September. Over 10 teams have registered for these competitions, which showcases the development of women's rugby locally. Taliaoli says that compared to the past few years, there wasn't enough support for women's footy, but now they're in a position to support its development and growing the number of participation in a safe environment for women to learn. Bovai's Scrum School and 10s competition is free for all to register.
That wraps up this evening's news package, but before we part, here's one final look at today's top stories. Consumer Affairs Division are on their efforts on refunding public following complaints about fuel prices last Thursday. Foreign Affairs Minister Tongatapu Kamanu leads Tonga's delegation to the 65th Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference in Canada, and Tonga to host the next Tropic Twilight exercise in 2023. And that's it for tonight. Thank you for your company. I'm Bafana Bola. Good evening.